Hello, hello. It is a Friday. Thank goodness it is a Friday. To those of y'all who are looking forward to the weekend, is there any sport, Morris, on the weekend?
The World Cup final and Wimbledon final on Saturday.
There you go.
Sunday,
yeah. Morris, of course, being our resident sports aficionado here, especially on cricket. That said, Morris, welcome to the show. Morris is our writer and analyst here at the Institute for Race Relations, and of course head of campaigns. And we also have Sarah Gardner, a face that I'm sure you guys are very familiar with. Sarah, hello.
Hello.
Sarah, of course, is our chief editor, and now looking after our stakeholder relations.
Something along
those
what
lines.
they call stakeholder engagement.
We'll chat about that in some episode of the Big Liberty Show, probably. Hey guys, welcome to the show. Thank you. I've sort of done a very weird intro on this one. I'm that excited about it being Friday. Guys, let's hop straight into it. We have 5 issues we want to sort of chat about here today. Number one, and I think the one that really concerns me, is the news we heard from the Minister of Health that, hey, Cabinet has approved the National Health Insurance, the NHI. Now, we've been critical about this. We've written about this already on The Daily Friend. We have a colleague here in-house, Anthony Jeffrey, who's written extensively in terms of breaking it down as to why it's a problem. Essentially, it's the creation of an Eskom of South African healthcare. Sarah?
That's one way of putting it. The problem with the NHI is I've been tangentially watching this for about 3, 4, 5 years. It has been around that long. I'm not sure it's any more comprehensible now than it was then. Yeah. And as far as I'm aware, it hasn't actually been costed. But the estimates, so far as you can make estimates, are that we're bankrupt. I mean, no, we've bankrupted the country already. But if we could bankrupt the country again, this would be it. And at the same time, we're producing no better results as far as hospitalization goes.
Absolutely. And that's what really worries me. There's no real... there's no real attempt by the ANC really to go for things that work. We're sort of doing this weird socialist experiment or statist experiment, and just hoping that it comes together. Whereas the record of history of state-run bureaucracy is not a good one.
Morris, what we need to do is extend as far as we can private healthcare to people who don't have it at the moment, and then at the same time fix public healthcare. I mean, there was a survey done out of, I don't know how many hospitals it was, but at the hospitals they did, only 1 out of those would have been up to NHI standards from the pilot project. And we saw recently, there was a guy at RK Khan Hospital down in KwaZulu-Natal, I think. He was found with maggots in his mouth. And, I mean, that's a public cost. I mean, I don't know how NHI and forcing people to pay more tax is going to fix that kind of thing. And as Sarah says, this thing hasn't been costed, and there's going to be... This is going to be a bigger disaster than Eskom. And I'm going to throw in the politics here, just as a point that we can round off on. And I'm hoping there'll be a lot more writing on this on the Daily Friend. Remember, you can find all our writing and analysis at dailyfriend.co.za. A lot of people are online, because I made a meal of this online. A lot of people online have been wondering, but Big Daddy, this sounds fantastic. Look at the UK, for example, and France, and all these, European first world countries, basically. Oh, they have an NHS, it works so well, blah, blah, blah. And I've made the point quite clear. If you look at the data, the actual data, when it comes to casualty or trauma incidents, like you're in an accident and an ambulance picks you up and takes you to an emergency room, they're fine at that, right? They're actually really quite good at that. The problem comes when you have some disease that requires surgery and ongoing surgery, elective surgeries in essence. The waiting times are insane. In the UK, you have the same thing, between 6 and 9 months waiting times. In fact, there was a study that recently went out that showed that the waiting times have been getting worse in some of the districts. You have the same thing in France, the same thing in even the Scandinavian countries that I'm often told are so brilliant when it comes to this thing. Now, if you are already a state patient in this country, you know exactly what I'm talking about when I mention waiting times, where you're actually, healthcare is rationed, where you might not even get surgery. My mom was a victim of that because she was a cancer patient in KZN where there's no equipment. So one has to be realistic around these sort of issues and be careful what we wish for. And Morris, you made a good point. I think I want us to end off on this in terms of a better way, which is to extend private sector healthcare to more people, especially the poor.
But that's also the point. The difference between the UK NHS and what they want for the NHI is in the UK, you can still have a private medical aid.
Yeah.
With the NHI, how it looks now, you won't be allowed to probably have a private medical aid, or if you are, you'll be limited to what you can use it for. The NHI will cover most procedures and can only use those. Then you'll be able to use private coverage for only a very limited number of procedures. So you'll be put on some list, and that's the thing. I mean, instead of making everybody be forced to use the public healthcare system, more people should get access to the private healthcare system. And the private healthcare system is, in general, still pretty good in South Africa. And that's what we need to extend that to people who don't have it.
Absolutely. Sarah, I'm going to end off with you. I'm going to put something to you, which we've, I think, been punting in-house here, or maybe it's just something I've been punting, which is the idea of vouchers. We speak a lot about vouchers in education. And, I'm of the view we could do the exact same thing. In fact, we have an EED policy in-house, which I encourage you guys to check out on the IRR website. Look under our policies.
Sorry to interrupt. I just want to say Anthea has written, it's called The Golden Promise. What's wrong with the Golden Promise of NHI? I think it was written last year. And that's where we lay out all the problems with NHI and our solution, which includes vouchers.
Absolutely, guys. Check it out. Check it out. We have lots of content on these sort of things. Arm yourselves with the good arguments that you can use to fight back against bad policy. So, sorry, just to finish off with you, I said, I'll be in favor. I'm going to put something to you. I'll be in favor of the health budget, which I think is in excess of 360 billion rand last year. I could be wrong, but I'll correct myself in the descriptor. I would be in favor of that being broken up. In other words, getting rid of the bulky administration so that the state doesn't have to pay for an administration, the hospitals, et cetera, by privatizing them. And then the existing budget that would have gone into maintaining a state system, you break it up into vouchers for poor families so that they can purchase your medical aids, insurance, which also brings the cost down because you're suddenly introducing a bigger customer base for the private sector, which also grows. What do you think about that?
I think that, the one thing the voucher system should do is it takes account of changing circumstances. And that's what's so frightening about the ANC's policies and programs is they do not at all trust the individual to make his or her own decisions. And everything, the whole idea of everything, including the NHI, seems to be about drawing agency away from people.
Absolutely.
If they, you see, the other thing about using a voucher for a health system is it's more likely to be spread around. I mean, if you try and cajole, as I think they want to do, private health practitioners to serve on the state in a certain way, having come from a medical family, I can tell you that the private healthcare will just disappear and it will not go to the state. It will immigrate. And they can say as much as they like, that is what is going to happen.
Doctor will be a civil servant.
Yeah.
Think about that.
Guys, resist any attempt by any politician to exert state control over what should be decisions made by the family. Really, we're liberal, so we speak a lot about the individual, but really we're a family society, and decision-making should always happen within the family. The mother, the father, the gogo should make the decision around where you access healthcare, where you access education, and the state's role should be to support that by giving you the means. But anyway, I can assure you there will be writing on this on the Daily Friend. Make sure you log on to dailyfriend.co.za. I'm sure Anthea will probably put some pieces out and some of my colleagues are. Guys, let's move on to a funny one. And one which what's the German word? Schadenfreude? A little bit of Schadenfreude, but not really. We've been saying for the longest of times that if the DA doesn't reform and really bring itself back to a clear messaging that separates itself from the ANC and other essentially identitarian leftist political parties, that they're going to get lost in that and they're going to cede a lot of their votes. Ironically, they've ceded even more votes in the northwest. Morris?
Yeah, so there was a by-election for a ward in Stilfontein, which is in Matlosana municipality in northwest, and there has always been a pretty safe DA ward. The DP actually won it for the first time in 1998. So they lost it now on Wednesday to the Freedom Front Plus. So in 2016, in the last municipal election, the DA had got about 1,800 votes in that ward, the Freedom Front Plus about 660. Now in this by-election, the Freedom Front Plus's votes went up to nearly 1,000, which is actually amazing in a by-election. And the DA's collapsed to under 500. I mean, that is actually shocking for the DA. They need to do a lot of introspection. And look, I mean, there's going to be some people probably like our old friend Ms. Van Damme or Loyola Mpiti will say, this is actually a good thing. We're getting rid of the racists. This is amazing. But the thing is, if the DA carries on getting rid of the racists, they're going to be under 10% within 2 elections. So they need to decide what they are, and they need to stick to it. And I mean, they got to 22% of the vote by being firm on their policies. And
Absolutely.
I mean, obviously they went without mistakes and problems, and some of their messaging was wrong, obviously sometimes. But I mean, they've gone down the wrong path now, and if they don't reform, they're going to be in big trouble in the future, I think.
The voter needs something to believe in. And if you're not confident in your own messaging, if you are leaning on the side of a narrative that is espoused by your opponents, political opponents, I'm not sure any voter would want to back that horse.
I think there are 2 problems for the DA. The one is that it keeps trying to position itself to what voters want. Political parties are meant to stand there and say, we offer this, we stand for this. If you like what we stand for, join us. That's from a policy point of view. So let people come to you. The other thing is that they seem to be remarkably comfortable or moving towards ANC positions that are singularly poor and achieve poor results. And I don't know why they do it. And the latest one was talking about Pumzile van Dam telling the communications minister that she must make sure that we have a solid, well-standing, etc., public broadcaster. Well, hell, if we don't have the money for it, we shouldn't. There's no holy cow about having a public broadcaster. It's that sort of, ANC, but more honest.
But I think the thing with political parties and losing support is like what Ernest Hemingway said about becoming bankrupt. First it happened slowly and then very quickly. So I think it happened to the National Party in the 90s, the United Party before that. So parties that had lots of support and suddenly collapsed very quickly. And we've seen it happen in other countries. I mean, a good example is probably UNIP in Zambia. It was the party that dominated Zambian politics. Now they don't exist. And we've seen, elections in other countries overseas where the Liberal Party in Canada went from being the biggest party to, I think they had a majority in the Canadian Parliament, went down to 20 seats in the space of one election. I mean, they had the governing party again, but it shows you how party support can collapse very quickly if they're not careful.
Absolutely. Guys, let's move on. We still stay with the political parties. Just a quick reminder, guys, speaking to the mic. EFF fascism has literally come to be more bold, more pronounced, and they've moved on from just shouting slogans from their seats to now literally mobbing speakers that they disapprove of.
I was like, why is anybody surprised? I mean, the EFF,
absolutely,
they've always been this militarist movement and these. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to insult them too badly, but I mean, they're like toy soldiers, command-in-chief and central command and camo uniforms. That's not. You don't use that stuff in a democracy, and they are openly contemptuous of representative democracy. They are. I mean, you don't want to go over the top here, but you can see the parallels to the brown shirts and stuff in in 1920s and 1930s Germany.
And that's not an unfair comparison, because we saw it yesterday. And again, I'm not to say that yesterday was just the only example of it, or the day before in Parliament, where they essentially rushed up to the podium to confront Pravin Gordhan under the notion of, he's a quote-unquote constitutional delinquent.
Which is a made-up term as well.
Exactly. We're beginning to see, firstly, the perversion of language, the selling of false narratives, and a hypocrisy which is pushed to the side because, for example, their own Julius Malema has lost a few court decisions. How is he not a constitutional delinquent who shouldn't be put onto the podium or heard or speak? And also a corruption of actual values that protect all citizens, freedom of speech, freedom of association, etc., etc. What is the danger here, Sarah?
I think the danger here is not sufficiently recognizing it for what it is. I mean, as Mara says, the EFF has always been this. It's just that now you get on the sort of positive side, you get a sense of desperation. There are legal battles, there are potential legal battles. All of that is mounting, and the rhetoric is becoming sort of. It's always had its violent moments, but it's becoming sloppy and careless. Julius Malema talked recently about if we need to fight the violence of this government by violence, we will do it. Hello. And there's something visceral, really viscerally ugly about watching the EFF approach Gordhan and seek to intimidate him physically. It was in all the shenanigans they've put in Parliament. This was like
The next
the
level.
next stage. Yeah, and I think that I think part of the problem is that the media partly created Malema.
Absolutely.
And they've now got to uncreate him.
The funny thing is, and this will be our last gasp, I was listening to talk radio coming in here. But, the people who are calling in, some of them were saying, listen, I'm a young chap. I voted for the EFF. But what I saw there was very scary because it made me think or question what happens when they then enter into power. And I, even as a supporter, maybe constructively even want to disagree. Will I suddenly have a mob of people outside my house ready to bring violence upon me?
That's exactly the point, because that's the sort of tactics they've employed. For example, against Alex Katsavelos. He wasn't even back home yet, but they sort of besieged his house and terrified his family.
This doesn't even happen to people who aren't in the. This happens to people in the EFF. There has not been electoral conference in the EFF.
Exactly.
And remember, there've been scenes where EFF members stoned Julius Malema's car at the one meeting. So Julius Malema rules a party with an iron fist, and if he ever comes to power in South Africa, he will do the same here.
Yeah,
and
without a doubt.
So I think he's a scary individual. We need to be. I think that just one last thing on Malema.
Yeah.
I think he's very good at identifying problems. I just think his solutions are
crap.
Yeah, exactly.
Actually guys, let's move on. And another person who has trashy solutions, Faith Mutambi, basically goes on a tirade. Sorry, I'm going to look to you on this one, and criticizes the private sector. What was she saying, Sarah?
Basically, it was a long article, and to be honest, I actually didn't get to the bottom of it. But what she was saying is that the business community is at least as at fault as the government and should be held to account, without at all understanding that the business community is not a single entity. It is not. It doesn't represent anybody else in the business community. It's just a sort of global term for when you discuss the economy. But every organization, every business is different. Everyone is a different size. She cannot talk about it. So the bottom line is clearly she doesn't have a clue as to how business works.
The funny thing is, and I'll just open it up more broadly beyond Faith, is the lack of self-awareness by the ANC lackeys around you cannot build a property-owning and a prosperous society if your government is so busy throttling entrepreneurs, throttling the innovator, disincentivizing the individual from investing in the country by scaring them off on with things like EWC, for example, which is to confiscate one's property rights. Morris?
The ANC is blinded by ideology. I think we had a kind of a pragmatist ANC under Thabo Mbeki. I think he was still, he was ideologically part of the ANC, but he saw what needed to be done to build, as you say, a prosperous society and so on. And that's where in the noughties we saw 5% growth, unemployment was the lowest it's ever been, per capita incomes rising very quickly. And then what happened, we got Jacob Zuma. I don't think he actually had an ideology, but then he let the ideologues in the ANC take over policy. And I think Cyril Ramaphosa is probably himself an ideologue, and that's why we still carrying on this path. He doesn't have the testicular fortitude to go down a different path, I don't think.
I'm sure he doesn't. And let me bring in another topic as we look to round up, because it speaks to ideologues and maybe pragmatists, or rather the confrontation between the ideologues and the pragmatists. Here's a chap who used to be the deputy president of this country,
was a president.
Motlanthe. He writes this, can I call it honest review of the issue of property rights and
it's even more than that.
land
It's a
reform?
substantial commission, so it's a substantial report.
And he makes the case that EWC is maybe not the best tool to be even touting at this stage. Recently was in the news cycle also quite recently saying, look, EWC is just tantamount to anarchy in terms of how it'll play out. Our thoughts on Motlanthe standing up to the hegemony of the ANC right now?
Well, I think Motlanthe is just saying what most sensible people think. And I think, even a lot of people in the ANC know, even probably in the EFF know, EWC will be a disaster. You can't take away people's stuff. We've said this a million times before. Land reform is very important. Restitution is very important. But you cannot do that by taking away people's property without paying for it. So, and Kgalema Motlanthe knows that. And as you say, the property rights, or to build a property owning society, you need property rights. And property rights are the cornerstone of all other civil rights, actually.
But what's really frightening about this is that it's an ANC commission, essentially. It spends months doing work. It's a solid report. It says EWC is not a good idea. It will destroy the economy. Comes out in about 2017. Not months later does the ANC vote to go EWC. It's this extraordinary ability to completely ignore a thorough report is fascinating.
It's imagined reality or
it's like, thank you for doing it, and next we'll do the following.
Yeah.
And the whole idea also with the cabinet approving the NHI, it's almost a sense that every member of ANC in Parliament will commit suicide if the leadership says that's what we're going to do. Oh, sorry, there's one other point.
Yeah.
Where are the stalwarts?
Exactly.
Where are the stalwarts?
But I think like our colleague Frans Cornelius said, and I think he's right, if you look at the ANC does not consider Zimbabwe and ZANU-PF as a cautionary tale. They consider it as a model.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't matter what happens to the country, it's impoverished, 90% unemployment, doesn't even have its own currency, but ZANU-PF is still entrenched at the top.
Yep. And that's literally how they view it. You know, no matter what they do, they still get the electoral support. Guys, let me wrap it up right here. Thank you very much. And thank you for watching. You guys can look forward to the podcast, which we're now going to record and put out on the Iona website. And remember, this show comes out 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, and on a Friday. If you like what you see, if you like the content, then hey, hit that like and subscribe button to either the IRR YouTube account or the Big Daddy Liberty YouTube account. And remember, you can support the show, guys, and support the work that we do by becoming a friend of the IRR. You do that by SMSing your name to 32823. An SMS will cost you R1. Terms and conditions apply. Or hey, don't like SMSs? No stress. Find us online, irr.org.za/join. And you can sign up a monthly debit order of between 70 and 90 Rand over there. Guys, remember, we do have other campaigns out at the moment. We are, as an institution, are fighting for your right to control how you enjoy your pension and not have politicians enter that space through something called prescribed assets. So look out for that campaign. And you can see the Big Liberty Show. I'll be releasing an episode of Mike Schussler next week on this topic. Guys, thank you so much for watching. Look out for the podcast, as I said, on Iono website. And we'll see you guys next week.